Today on Words and Numbers, fat people,
homelessness in Germany,
hate speech,
and the Fed cuts interest rates.
All this and more coming up next on Words and Numbers, a Civil original production. Check us out at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Anthony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
What's new and exciting in your world this weekend?
I ran across some data on the homeless population in Germany that was surprising. You know, people always say, well, it's so much
I would
better.
assume they didn't have any.
Exactly. People say it's so much better in Europe and they don't have homeless problem and social things that we don't have and all this. It's actually quite astounding. The homeless population in the U.S. is, and of course, it's hard to measure these things. So I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt. And I went to a website whose name escapes me, but they're an advocacy group for the homeless. So they would have an incentive to overstate the numbers.
They will overstate the numbers.
They claim 770,000 homeless in the U.S. I've seen numbers elsewhere as far down as 550,000. So the truth is probably somewhere in there.
I got to say, that sounds plausible.
Yeah, that seemed plausible to me as well. Now, people who live in urban areas are going to immediately write back and say, oh, no, it's way higher than that. And I'll remind all of you of the observation bias, that if you live in an urban area, you're seeing more of the homeless than everybody else. And conversely, for those of you in the rural areas who are going to say, no, we don't have a homeless problem at all. Yeah, you don't, but the people in the urban areas do.
It turns out everybody's right.
Yeah, right. So anyway, the number for the U.S. is somewhere between 550,000, 770,000. Here's where life gets interesting. Germany's number is 860,000.
No way. They have nowhere near our population.
Ah, yeah. And that's Germany's 860,000 homeless out of 84 million population. That's a 1% homeless rate.
1%? Oh, my God.
In the U.S., it's, take the high number, 770,000 out of 340 million. We're 0.2%. So Germany's homelessness problem is five times the size of ours. Yeah.
Wow. That's shocking.
Isn't that astounding? Now, one of the articles I ran across said that the number is being inflated by immigrants who are coming in and they don't have jobs and all of this.
They're still homeless and they're still in Germany.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So I don't know what to say about that, but the homelessness rate is 5 times what it is here, which led me down a rabbit hole of, I wanted to know, what about poverty in Germany versus poverty here? And immediately tripped over a problem. In the U.S., we measure, as I argue it should be measured, we measure poverty on an absolute scale. That is, we draw a line in the sand, and you can argue whether it's too high or too low, but we draw a line in the sand, and if your income is below that line, you live in poverty. If it's above that line, you don't. So we'll call that absolute poverty. Germany doesn't measure absolute poverty. It measures relative poverty, which irks me to no end, that the concept of relative poverty, because it's going to capture, yes, indeed, truly poor people, but it's also going to capture people who aren't poor at all. They just they aren't as rich as some other guy.
That's right. That's a statistic to get to envy, not to get to answers.
Right. It's a statistic. If you want to argue that there's an ongoing systemic problem with inequality, you're going to point to relative poverty, because by definition, relative poverty never goes away.
And
put
we
Warren Buffett and Bill Gates in the same room, one of them is going to be relatively poor.
And we point this out a lot, Ant, but as we talk about poverty in the United States, we're talking about people who live indoors, mostly, people who have enough money to buy the necessities of life, people who have cell phones and cars and air conditioning. We're not talking about the kind of biting poverty that you see when you get to India.
Right, yeah.
Now, we do have pockets of biting poverty, don't get me wrong, but that's not really what we're talking about when we're talking about poor people in the U.S. And we do have this envy of the wealthy, even though people have their needs being met, which I think is really the bright line distinction between a functional society and a non-functional society. Are your needs being met? That's probably the very first question I would ask. And after that, you get into quality of life and relative things. But that first question, there's no relativity about it. That's a binary thing, yes or no.
So I'm looking at the numbers, and of course, it's going to be difficult to compare these because the U.S. tends not to measure relative poverty. We measure absolute. And Germany tends not to measure absolute poverty. They measure relative. But in the U.S., we have the official poverty measure, which is, there's the poverty line, and it's adjusted based on number of people in the household, but it's by that number, it's 11%. 11% of Americans are living in poverty.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
Yeah, and there's some problems with the poverty measure. We did maybe 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, an interview with Senator Phil Gramm about he had a book on inequality in America. And he pointed out in this book that when we concoct our poverty measures, we ignore all the things we do to alleviate poverty. So in other words, when we look at a household and we say, how much income do you have, because we want to know whether you're poor or not poor, they will ignore things like the earned income tax credit. They'll ignore income assistance or public housing or whatever it is. Not to say those things aren't important, but rather you get a very different picture if you put those things in versus if you take them out. So the quality of life of somebody there is not at all represented by the straight up market income.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
But this is a long way to get to my point. What other way do you know? What brought all this to my attention is Germany was experimenting with what they call nests. These are little self-contained. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Have you? Yeah, self-contained
very
things.
Cool. I want one for my backyard.
Well, apparently this is a thing now. You can go online. I saw a number of companies that are selling these things.
Yeah, no, the HOA would have something to say about that.
Yeah, they probably would. But the nest is basically a sleeping pod. It's designed to be, it's insulated. It has, the ones in Germany are solar powered. They have heat and air conditioning in the summer, and you can get more fancy ones. You can plug in your phone to charge it, all of that stuff. But they put these things out in Germany, or on this experimental basis, for the homeless to use, particularly if it gets too cold or too hot or something. And this reminded me of something I've been dealing with some of the nonprofits that I work with here. It goes back to the concept of human respect. And some of the nonprofits I deal with ask the question, how do we get more people to come in? And what they mean is people that they're there to serve, whether it's food banks or Catholic charities or whatnot. How do we get people to come in? That's the wrong question. It does not proceed from a vantage point of human respect. With human respect, it's not about me and what I've set up and how can I get you to come take advantage of it. It's about you and what do you need, and I should be going out to meet you where you are. And that's exactly what these nests do. You're not asking the homeless to come to some shelter that you have organized. Rather, you're going to where they are and providing for their needs in their circumstances. And that, to me, is a much greater showing of human respect.
I would like to keep an eye on this over time, right? Because my prediction, knowing human nature the way I do, is that it would run the very significant risk of ending up looking like Section 8 housing in the U.S. Right? Subsidized housing brings with it all manner of trouble and problems that are generally unexpected, right? There are unintended consequences of public housing. And they seem to be inescapable because it happens everywhere, every time somebody tries it. Yeah. Which leads me to believe that this new approach may well yield new answers. But then again, it might not. And I'd be interested in checking in on it in a year or two.
Yeah, and I think what the thing you identify is something we all need to pay very close attention to. Again, if you're concerned about human respect, you're going to ask this question. You see homelessness. Is that the problem or is it the symptom of a problem? Because if it's a symptom of the problem, no matter what you do, to serve the homelessness, you're not going to make the problem go away.
And I'll go a step further. It's multiple symptoms. Mm-hmm. So you can't, if you figure out an answer that works for one person, it's not transferable.
Yeah.
So this is a tough nut to crack. The fact that there are still homeless people in the United States, the richest country the world has ever seen, tells you that this is a difficult thing. Because if we could solve it without tremendous difficulty, we would have. It's persistent.
It's a difficult thing, and it's not difficult because of resources.
That's right.
That's not the weak link here.
No, we can't figure out why people end up this way. We literally can't figure it out. We know broadly that there's a mental illness problem, right? That really works on this. We also know broadly that there's an addiction problem. We also know broadly that those two things overlap to some degree, right? And then we also know that there are these 85 other reasons, and you can't solve this problem. Here in Arizona, I'll tell you, in Tucson, there was a row of old seedy no-tell motels, right, where people would go during the afternoon lunch break and have a special visit with the secretary or some such thing. And they're all closed down now. They're on a street called the Miracle Mile. But, you can't make this shit up. Anyway, the city has taken over one of the hotels, maybe more at this point, and they're going to start using them as shelters. Well, I mean, the buildings are already there. Not going to cost them anything. You might as well. No hotel wants to do business there anymore. Okay, it's interesting enough. Let's see if it works. Right? Mm-hmm. It's worth a shot.
Right.
And now we wait.
Get Words and Numbers on Civil.com and on Civil's TV and mobile apps. Regular episodes are free. Sign up for an annual membership to support our show and for access to member-exclusive content.
I want to talk, Ant, about the hard time we've been given to fat people for the past, 30, 40, 50 years. Fat people get the worst of everything. Fat people are the last group of people that you can ridicule without getting any pushback whatsoever. You could be horrible.
Well, I'd say today you get a little bit of pushback. But
you can
10 years
horrible.
Ago, even.
Look, you walk into any comedy show, if you weigh 400 pounds, you're the topic of conversation. Right? And then we had the body positivity movement, remember that? Where we declared that, you could be obese and healthy. No, you can't. Stop it right now. Making excuses for fat people isn't the way to go either, right? And I say this as a formerly almost gigantic man. You knew me when I was...
No, you were heavier when I knew you, but I've seen pictures of you from before I knew you. You were twice the man you were even then.
That's almost literally true. I was what's that word the doctor kept using? I was a fat ass. And yeah, and look, I'm still not exactly thin, but it's a different universe than it once was. Losing weight is eminently possible. People don't do it because they don't want to, not because they can't. But anyway, that's getting me beyond the point, because there's a new study that's come out, and it's really quite fascinating. I found it on Vice.com, so hey, take everything with a grain of salt, but you should go look this one up, because it turns out that, yes, fat people, really fat people, people who are obese and beyond, like the BMI of 40 and up, they do, in fact, have an increased risk of death. I think it's like 2.1, which is significant. But here's the shocking part. The very, very, very skinny people have a higher risk.
Really?
How about that?
Wow.
And they're like at three times more likely to die.
Now, when you say really skinny, do you mean like medically this is a problem skinny, like anorexic, or just
BMI's under 18.5.
under 18.5? Okay.
So we could be very exact about that.
Yeah.
And they have, and the corresponding obese people on the other side of the distribution are only 2 times more likely to die.
Wow.
So we should be giving a hard time to people whose pelvic bones show through their clothes.
See, now look at the interesting thing, though. We would feel uncomfortable doing that. You're not going to get a comic making fun of somebody.
No, but being
maybe
very,
a little bit thin, but too much, no.
Being incredibly thin is also a choice. Now, nature plays here. You have a body shape, right? And
in some cases, nature plays hard. Yeah,
it plays hard. And I was never going to be a small man, and you would have known that if you met my relatives.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're all big fat Italians. But I have control over a good deal of that. And that's about the best you can do, right? Your genetics play a significant role, and you play a significant role. So are you fully responsible for your outcome? Well, not exactly, but yeah, kind of. And if you're too fat, you should probably drop some pounds. It's unpleasant. It's the same thing I always say, Aunt, with things like this. It's incredibly simple, but it's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Things can be simple and hard at the same time. As a matter of fact, almost everything in life is very simple, and most things in life are pretty hard. So there you go.
I'll tell you, prior to COVID, I guess it was, over the course of maybe 5 years, I dropped like 50 pounds.
Yeah, you really thinned. You thinned down.
But it was because
pronounced.
You and I were spending so much time on the road together, and you
Right.
were fighting your diabetes, so you were eating zero carb
No
diets?
carbs. Yeah, no carbs.
Yeah. So anyway, I figured, okay, well, James is doing this, and he's not happy with it, but we're together. I should share in the misery, and I started doing it too. And before I knew it, I wasn't trying to lose weight. I was just eating with James.
Try not to. Right.
Yeah.
Try not to. And I'm down like 75 pounds. Right. It's that kind of difference. I don't think I've ever really publicly talked about this sort of thing, because why the hell would you? But I feel better now than I did when I weighed 75 pounds more.
Yeah.
And I would guess that people who are incredibly underweight have their own set of problems that we don't know about, right? So, I feel for them, but they are 3 times more likely to die than somebody with a BMI over 40. And
that's amazing.
And that's a giant person. Over 40 is a giant person. I think obesity starts around 30, right? 28, 29, something like that. So there you go. And enough of that, though, because we have to have time for the foolishness of the week, Aunt. And I want to get to our, what's the correct adjective? Boy, adjectives are hard sometimes, aren't they? When you really want to...
Usually when you say what's the correct word, you then let loose with a string of expletives.
Well, I want to be more respectful because it is the Attorney General of the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've had some idiots in that post over time. Make no mistake. I remember, Alberto Gonzalez during the Bush administration. He really wasn't impressing anybody. And I only remember him because I was in D.C. and his motorcade held me up. You know how they shut down streets when somebody important comes through? And I was close enough to his motorcade to indicate my opinion on a recent thing he had done, which made me very happy. But see, that's just the thing. In the United States of America, I, a mere commoner, could look at the Attorney General of the United States and say, listen to me, you fucking imbecile. Which is how I started my little tirade when he held me up in Washington, D.C. And he looked over at me and he looked genuinely concerned. And I thought, aha, he will remember this at least for the next 4 minutes. which is probably the best you're going to do. But I want to get us to Pam Bondi, I guess. Sorry, mispronouncing her name. It's not right. I want to get us to Pam Bondi, our present Attorney General. I suspect not for much longer, because she can't help herself but from doing stupid-ass things. And what did she do this time? And she's only been in this job for 8 or 9 months, right? And she comes up every other day for doing something remarkably stupid. And this time, in an interview on the Katie Miller podcast, which I have not paid much attention to in the past, but I'm paying a lot of attention to it now, Bondi said, and this is an exact quote. I want you to remember that. We're not making this up. These are the words that came tumbling out of the Attorney General's mouth. There's free speech, and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now after what happened to Charlie Kirk, in our society. We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech.
Wow. Is she aware that the Supreme Court has ruled on this?
Is she aware that there's a First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States?
Yeah. And this is the person who's supposed to be enforcing the law.
Enforcing the law. We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech.
Wow.
First, and I got some things to say here, but first, there is in the United States, in the eyes of the Constitution, no such fucking thing as hate speech. How many times do I have to say it? We've been saying this for years. There's no such thing as hate speech in constitutional law, which means your political speech is utterly protected. And if you're out in public saying a bunch of dopey shit that no rational person would say, you're nonetheless protected. Freedom of speech only matters if we protect the speech we don't care for.
Yeah.
That's
there's
it.
There's a very good reason why there's no hate speech. Because the minute you open the door to hate speech, you invite all sorts of people to define down what hate is,
what hate
as
speech,
they've done. And if you want an example, look at what people have done with the word violence. All of a sudden, if you look at somebody the wrong way on the street, you have committed violence.
The word violence has almost no meaning anymore.
Yeah. And the word hate would come to have no meaning as well.
You know, you and I have talked recently about bullying and how that can be literally any damn thing. Or if somebody looks at me sideways, oh, I'm being bullied. You're being bullied if there's blood on the floor. That's when you're being bullied. That's violence. When I tell you I don't like you or some such thing, that is not violence. That's an opinion. Those are words.
It doesn't mean you have to like it.
Nope. As a matter of fact, you
violence.
probably shouldn't, right? I don't like what most people say most of the time. I just don't. And I have no right to shut them up. None whatsoever. Everybody has the right to speak their mind whenever they want. And that's going to make people uncomfortable, and that's fine.
And let me underline something we have said before, just a couple episodes ago, I think. If you're only protecting speech that you agree with, you are not in favor of free speech.
Not even a little.
You've got to protect the speech you don't agree with, that you don't like. Then you're in favor of free speech.
I want to give you a quick quiz. Are you willing?
Sure.
How many words are contained in the First Amendment?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, you've seen it.
I have seen it. Judging from the size, I'd say 25.
45. 45 simple words. And that protects your right to speech, your right to religion, your right to assemble, the right to a free press. A lot is covered in 45 words. It's a masterclass in getting to the point, which most people can't do. And I'll admit is difficult. Pam Bondi, for her part, had no choice but to walk this back the next day.
Yeah.
And she said, no, oh, no, that's not what I meant. Her words are clear. And let me remind you, we will absolutely target you, go after you if you are targeting anyone with hate speech. Pretty clear what that was. But she said what I really meant was that we will go after you if you're inciting violence.
Well, that doesn't make me feel much better.
It doesn't, but it's a different story. And
right.
That story you can actually work with. Because, and now I'm in an educational context, so I could say just about anything. But Aunt, if I said, I'm coming to where you are, and I'm going to shoot you as soon as I get there, that's different than saying, I don't like you, Aunt.
Mm-hmm. Right.
One is a direct threat to your safety. The other is an opinion about you as a human being.
Now,
these are very different.
Does the court allow the one to be regulated?
No. Yes, incitement is already regulated.
I see.
It's the fighting words doctrine, largely. Right? If I engage in what the court has called fighting words, then I'm on the hook for whatever happens next. So
it's like it's literally inciting something.
Yeah. When you see somebody, and you've seen this in the last couple of days, going right down the middle of a Charlie Kirk memorial, saying horrible things about him as other people, those are fighting words. And I saw a guy, riding a scooter saying horrible things, and they yanked him off the scooter and beat the hell out of him. Oh. And, well, he had engaged in fighting words. He bears some responsibility for what happened. Not all of it, right? Because you can't assault somebody either. But both sides now have a legitimate claim. Pam Bondi had to walk it back because it was so profoundly stupid that everybody, right, left, and center called her on it.
Yeah.
But that was her first inclination, right? Your first inclination almost always shows people who and what you are.
Look, plenty of people don't understand or misinterpret or don't like the First Amendment, but the Attorney General, the highest office in the country, whose job it is to enforce the law.
Yeah, it's her job. Any constitutional law professor at any community college would be better than her.
Wow.
And that, I'm saying a mouthful there, having been a constitutional law prof myself. So there we go.
Today we want to talk about interest rates, which normally are a boring topic, and so we'll do our best to try and make it interesting.
Yeah, no, it's going to be boring today too.
But the Fed cut interest rates today, 25. Oh, and I'll say this. Here's the words that people use, so you know this next time you're at a party and you want to geek people out. The Fed cut interest rates by what we call 25 basis points. A basis point is 1/100th of a percentage. So 25 basis points is 1/4%. And the reason we say 25 basis points is because of some mathematical strangeness that if I were to say the Fed cut interest rates, for example, 1%, that's very different than saying the Fed cut interest rates 1 percentage point.
And people make that error all the time.
All the time.
I used to be an editor at the American Institute for Economic Research. Economists would send me their work, and I would edit their work. PhD level economists made that mistake so often that I didn't know what to do with them. Yeah. Because the difference in saying 1% and 1 percentage point could be very, very profound.
Well, I'll give you an example. Think about going from 2% to 1%. That's a 1 percentage point reduction.
But it is 50%.
Also a 50% reduction. You've gone from 2 to 1. Yeah.
So you got to get these things right.
Yeah, we use the term basis point. Basis point is like the percentage point thing, but it's 1/100th. So 25 basis points is 1/4 of a percentage point.
And so when the Fed cuts or raises, it's almost always by 25 basis points.
It tends to go in multiples of 25.
Sometimes it's 50, but it's almost always 25. Yep. And if 25 isn't enough, it'll be 25 quarter after quarter or month after month. They'll do it serially, but only by 25 basis points at a time.
Yeah, an exception was when they cut rates for the first time toward the end of last year. They did two cuts. Their first one was a 50 basis point, and then they did 25 basis points the month after that.
And we should stop here because their eyes are already glossing over, and they're saying, "What the hell do I care?"
Oh yeah. Okay,
And
there's
care.
a reason
you care
should.
a lot.
Yeah,
You care a lot. Yeah.
there's a reason you should care, and there's a reason you should not care. And the reason that you should not care is probably the reason why you think you should care, but you shouldn't. And that is when the Fed cuts rates like that, everybody says, oh, good, my mortgage rate is going to go down, or I can take a car loan, it's going to be less. And the answer there is, for a whole bunch of technical reasons, no. The Fed made a major change in, or I should say Congress and the Fed together made a major change in the banking system that was implemented between 2008 and 2020. But the long and short of it is, ever since roughly 2020, when the Fed changes interest rates, it has an effect on the very short-term rates. It has almost no effect at all on the longer-term rates. So your 5-year car loan, not going to see much difference there. 30-year mortgage, probably aren't going to see any difference there. The Fed's just messing with short-term rates.
But
Why you should care. Okay, so that story is a little more interesting and a little more complicated. Let's start with why the Fed is doing this at all. And frankly, I think this is nonsense. And let me just throw that out there.
The Fed is buckling to political pressure.
Well, no, I think the Fed is nonsense. Its existence is nonsense.
I'm with you there, brother. I didn't think we were going to go down that road.
Look,
yes.
People make jokes about the old Soviet Politburo, where a bunch of guys got together around a table and decided what is the price of steel going to be this month. And they set the price of steel and ends up being the wrong price. Either they set it too high and there's, not enough steel, or set it too low, there's too much, whatever it is. But we understand that you can't do that with prices. Prices have to respond to market forces, demand and supply. But then we turn around and we say, oh yeah, well, the Fed's going to set rates. No, setting rates is the exact same thing as setting the price of steel. Now you're setting, it's a different product, it's loanable funds, but it's the same idea. The interest rate should be left to the markets.
Money is a commodity just like everything else.
It is. And what happens when you have something like the Fed setting the interest rate, you run the very real risk of it setting it at the wrong level. If it sets it too high, there won't be enough consumption because we're all going to be saving, taking advantage of those high rates. If it sets it too low, we're not going to have any savings because it's not worth it to save, so we're just going to consume everything now. There's some proper level. Let the market figure that out. Now, thankfully, since 2020, all these changes have meant that the markets are figuring out the longer-term rates. The Fed's only messing with the short-term rate, and that's what it cut today. This it's technically called the Fed funds rate, but it's this short-term rate. Now, here's why the Fed exists. It was founded for the purpose of doing two things: keeping the economy growing, so we say keeping full employment, and keeping prices stable. Those were its two short charges. Yeah, control inflation and keep unemployment at the lowest possible level. The problem is those two goals are mutually contradictory.
That's right. You're going to have to find a point that you're comfortable with because you can't have zero on both sides.
Yeah. If you have no unemployment, then what's happening? Businesses now are fighting for workers because there isn't a pool of available workers. And how do they do that? By raising the wages, but that raises prices. You start getting inflation. On the other hand, if you want to keep the inflation low, we're gonna contract the money supply, but that's going to drive up interest rates. And so
put people out of work.
The higher interest rates are, the less businesses will borrow, and the economy starts to slow.
Yep. And so you have to find a level that you're comfortable with. And
there's a balance.
For years, I think decades even, 2% inflation was the goal of the Fed, the stated goal.
Right.
And they did a pretty good job of keeping it at 2%, which meant that
They
a
did.
certain number of us were going to be unemployed as a result. But they kept the unemployment numbers at acceptable levels within acceptable tolerances.
Yeah.
And we all kind of moved on with our business.
And before people start getting bent out of shape and saying, well, see, this is capitalism. It can only work if you have the unemployed. It's not the same pool of unemployed people. It's people coming in and out. So think of the pool of unemployed as a buffer that is, if demand for labor goes up, there's some people there businesses can draw from. If demand for labor goes down, more people go in. But it's not the same people. People are passing through, getting jobs and losing jobs, so forth. But this is what the Fed is supposed to do, is to adjust the interest rate so that we get that balance between inflation and unemployment.
There's a little tiny bit more. The Fed was set up to be independent of political influence.
Yes, that's really important.
It is really important because people in Congress or people in the executive branch could lean all over the Fed to move interest rates one way or the other to suit their ends and needs.
Yeah.
And their ends and needs might not be the same as our ends and needs.
And one of the big needs that the federal government has right now is for low interest rates, because when your debt is $37 trillion, 25 basis points is about, I think, $100 billion a year.
My quick math tells me it's in the neighborhood of 100 billion.
Yeah. So let's put this in context. Elon Musk purportedly cut $100 billion from the federal budget. Dropping the 25 basis point drop we had today gives us an Elon Musk every year hereafter.
Every year. That's right.
Yeah.
And a 50 basis point doubles it, right, et cetera,
Right.
et
Yeah,
cetera.
exactly.
So the executive branch and Congress, the legislative branch, they all have a vested interest, every one of them.
Yeah, they've got a vested interest in low interest rates.
Driving that interest rate down. And the Fed was designed not to have to take that into account.
Yeah, the Fed's not supposed to think about the political issues. And in fact, although the president appoints the Feds, I believe
they serve
the
so
Fed,
long.
Yeah,
they serve so
they have
long
a
that
term like 12
outlive,
years or something. Yeah,
it's ridiculously long. But when you see Donald Trump trying to fire one of them, you know what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody with a brain knows what's going on. Did she commit mortgage fraud? I have no idea. Maybe. I mean, maybe. We've all committed crimes that we're wholly unaware of, and many of us have committed crimes that we are very aware of. Did she commit that crime? I don't know. If she did, is it a fireable offense? I don't know. Who has the authority to fire her exactly? I don't know. Who wants to fire her? That I know.
Yep.
Why does he want to fire her? I know that too.
And that we know too. Right.
I know that too. So, I'm dubious about the whole thing.
Yep.
As I would be under any similar circumstance.
Yeah, and you do not want the political influence, because the Fed is having impact, real impact on our lives as it makes this choice between inflation and unemployment. You want the Fed making those decisions based on what it perceives as best for us, not what it perceives as best or more expedient for politicians.
Right, because those are often, if not always, going to be very, very different things.
Yeah. I submit that what's been happening is the Fed has been coming under pressure. And the big pressure, I don't think, is business about Donald Trump firing Fed chairs or this sort of thing. That's not what worries me. What worries me is a different kind of pressure that the Fed is not going to be able to ignore. And that's the following. As the government borrows more and more money, and the interest on the debt becomes gargantuan, it's now $1.2 trillion. The interest on our debt is larger than most economies on the planet.
Right. That's right. Most big economies.
Yeah.
I mean,
$1.2 trillion.
I'm not talking about Somalia here. right? Yeah.
But
And it's every damn year. And it
yes,
only gets
you get
bigger.
that every year. Yeah.
And it only gets bigger.
The bigger it gets and the larger the interest becomes, the more the Fed is going to have to face an unspoken third goal. On top of keeping unemployment low and keeping inflation under control, there's this third unstated goal of keeping the federal government solvent.
And for a while, that will be possible.
For a while, it'll be possible. I claim that we're quickly coming to the point where it's not possible, and I say that you start to see the beginnings of it now, with the Fed unable to get inflation back to where it was prior to COVID. Right now, it's running about a percentage point higher than it was prior to COVID.
Point. And 1 percentage point higher is 50% higher.
Yeah, right. Yeah, 1 percentage point on top of it was like I think that it was like 2% or 1% or something. 2%.
2 to 3.
2 to 3 right. is way more impactful than going from 10 to 11.
That's right. It's gigantic.
Yeah.
And everybody knows it because the price levels never went down after we had the giant COVID bump. Right?
Yes.
We saw prices spike and then they stayed high. And now from that spike, they're getting higher again. And that's some shit. Ain't that some shit? And we all have to live with it. And there are certain things that the politicians could do to make it better. And they refuse to do that. I mean, not having all these idiotic tariffs, for example, would bring prices down considerably.
Yeah, if you're not going to make it better, at least don't make it worse.
Stop making it worse. Because honestly, I say this so often, you're either making it better or you're making it worse. And politicians almost never make anything any better.
Well, let me go back to the government borrowing. Now, the government borrows an amount each year that is about, and it's hard to measure these things, right? But I've looked at various measures, and it ends up being approximately 10% of all the money that's borrowed on the planet in a year. The government will borrow that annually. So when I say all the money borrowed on the planet, I mean all the other governments, all the businesses, all the people inside the U.S., outside the U.S., all those cars, all those homes, all of that borrowing's going on. The amount the federal government borrows is about 1/10 that size.
Good God.
Which you wouldn't expect it. That's huge.
It is absolutely huge.
Now, ask yourself...
My God. Anthony, oh my God.
Isn't it gargantuan? Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, ask yourself, where would the government go to borrow a chunk of money that large? And there's only two places it can go. The first is markets, that it goes out onto the market, and other governments or businesses or us will lend the government money. You do that when you purchase treasury bills or savings bonds. You're lending the government money.
Yeah.
There's a catch to that. The catch is that it drives up interest rates. Because who else wants to borrow your money? IBM, right. Because they're building a new something, or some startup that's doing some R&D. They want to borrow money. Or some kid who's going to college wants to borrow money. Of course, he borrows from the government, but that doesn't count. You want to borrow money to buy a car. You go to the bank, but the bank's money actually doesn't belong to the bank. It belongs to people who save the money there. So what's happening is, as the government steps in to borrow a huge chunk of money, it's competing with all those other people who are looking to borrow money. And anytime you got competition, it drives up the price. What's the price? The interest rate.
Yeah, but there's really, really bad news.
Oh yeah, because
with number two, there's really bad news with number two, because of the two, that first one is absolutely the one you want them to be doing if they're going to do it at all, because number two involves force and fraud.
Well, the other option, apart from going to markets to borrow, and there you're going to drive up the interest rates, is to borrow from the Fed. Now, I say borrow from the Fed. Technically, the Fed has to make the choice to loan the money, but regardless of who's making choices, the end result is you're borrowing from the Fed. When the government borrows from the Fed, something new happens. Money enters the system that wasn't there before, because the Fed is not part of the monetary system. It's separate from the economy. When the Fed loans...
This is the fraud part.
Yeah,
This is
and
the fraud part.
And now you get inflation. Now you get inflation.
That's the force part.
Yeah, because when you get inflation, what's happening? New dollars have entered the system. When prices are low, who gets to spend those dollars? Well, the government. They're the ones who just borrowed it. They spend it. As they spend it, they create inflation, prices go up. And now, when you, James, go to buy your beloved Diet Coke, it costs 10% more than it did before.
Every dollar in your pocket is diminished in value by every dollar the government creates.
Yep.
It's literally that simple. There's no esoterica, there's no magic here. Your money is worth X. When the government puts more money into the system, now your money is worth point something X.
Yeah, or think of it this way. There's a certain amount of purchasing power in the country. The more dollars you have, the less purchasing power each of those dollars has.
This is what shrinkflation comes from. Right? Because the companies have every motivation to keep you buying their bottles of mustard. Right. And hope you don't notice when it goes from 12 to 11.5 ounces.
Yeah, they're hoping you'll be less mad about losing the half an ounce than you would be about them tacking on 10% more of the price. But it's the same thing either way.
It's inflation either way. That's right. And it's inflation all the way down. Every single thing becomes more expensive because your dollars are worth less.
Economists call inflation a tax, and that's not. They're not playing with words. It really is a tax.
It's absolutely a tax.
Although, whereas a regular tax is the government taking away dollars from you, inflation is a tax that doesn't take away your dollars. It takes away their purchasing power. But that's the only reason dollars are valuable.
It's the same exact thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can't put that together, and I've never understood why.
It's really strange because, every other tax goes up for a vote. And we can argue about it, and we can tell our congressman we're not happy. This one flies under the radar. People aren't aware it's a tax.
Yeah. It's pernicious, right? It comes in the night and takes your money. You don't see it happening.
Right. Words and Numbers is part of the Civil Network. Civil is a streaming platform dedicated to upgrading civilization by exploring better ways for people to organize, innovate, and thrive. At Civil, we believe that societies flourish when their members honor the civic equality of all people and engage with one another through cooperation. Civil seeks great minds from around the world to share bold ideas for fostering healthy, dynamic societies. By creating space for honest disagreement among people who share a commitment to building a better future, Civil offers a refreshing alternative to divisive punditry and insular echo chambers. Words and Numbers is freely available, but those who subscribe to Civil will access exclusive content, including regular live streams and conversations with remarkable people who are working to build a better society. For more information and to subscribe, visit civil.com. That's CIVL.com. Use the code Words and Numbers, that's one word, for 50% off an annual subscription. You started off by talking about political influence over the Fed and what a bad idea it is.
Right.
And I claim that political influence is coming, and it's going to be insurmountable. And the way it's coming is because the bigger the debt gets, the more the Fed has to think about what's good for the federal government. And that means that we're going to reach a point here where we, in effect, don't have monetary policy anymore. The Fed has Fed becomes an ATM of necessity for the federal government.
That's right. And when that happens, inflation is officially out of control for the rest of our history.
Right. By definition, it's out of control because the Fed's got to print whatever it is the government needs.
Yeah, and look, listen to the words, for the rest of our history. It will never go down again. And there's no way around that. So, these are the unseen forces that work on us as citizens. We don't perceive them until the flashpoint hits.
Right. And then it's obvious.
And then it's obvious. But we've been predicting these things for years because if you know where to look, You can predict these things. It's not that hard, actually. So now what's the prediction? Well, the prediction is we've got a lot of pain in store, and that pain is going to get progressively worse over time. We're going to first end up living like Europeans. Europeans don't have nearly the standard of living that we do here in the U.S.
No, they don't.
And we're going to end up living like them for a while, and then we're going to live like South Americans for a while, and because the standard of living is much lower there, and then our money will be absolutely worthless. We'll be
and when
weighing
you
it
say,
at the store just like the Venezuelans do.
when you say the Europeans don't have our standard of living, it's, as I was looking at these numbers the other day, it's like one half.
Half.
Or the better countries have 3/4.
Yep. And these are perfectly reasonable countries that I'd be perfectly happy living in, right? These are good places. They just don't have the standard of living we have. And where the rubber meets the road on this, where people don't really think about it, it means their houses are smaller. They have one car or no cars, right? Most Europeans don't have clothes dryers, things like that.
Right.
Air conditioning is a rarity.
Yeah.
Right? These sorts of things. They're not poor. We're not saying they're poor. We're not even saying they're defective. But the standard of living is lower. And we will have that standard of living, and then it will get worse, not better. Because this is a one-way train.
Let's talk about the end game, because as you're talking about this, it occurred to me, every country, to my knowledge, every country that has had this problem of runaway debt followed by the necessity of printing money and then the subsequent inflation, every country has ended up in one or two, maybe both places. And that is, somebody comes along or some buddies come along and make the drastic cuts. Think about Milei now in Argentina.
Yep.
Yeah, they make
Milei.
the drastic cuts that should have been made a long time ago. Thatcher in England, when she came to power, selling off all these industries that the government had nationalized.
The kids called her Margaret Thatcher Milk Snatcher because she took away school milk.
Really? But you get to the point that you have to do this, and it's painful. And the economists say, but if you had done this 20 years earlier, it still would have been painful, but not nearly as painful as it is now.
Yeah, it would have been painful for 20 minutes. Now you got a way of life, right? There's a radical difference here.
So that's one of the end points. The other end point, and my guess is that most countries have done both of these, the cutting of the spending, and the other one is coming up with a new currency.
Yep.
So they issue a new currency, and the game here, this is a sleight of hand. It actually doesn't solve it doesn't solve our problem, it solves the government's problem. They'll come out with the new dollar, and there'll be all sorts of fanfare about how they're going to restore the value of the dollar back like when your grandfather used to buy a newspaper for 10 cents. We're going to have those days
all
again.
over again. That's right.
Yeah. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to have this new dollar, and you got to turn in your old dollars. You have a certain period of time, and you'll get new dollars in exchange, and new dollars are going to be more valuable. Yet what they're doing is hiding a one-shot massive inflation. So you'll turn in your old dollars 2 for 1 to get the new dollars.
And look, I'll tell you straight up, if you think this is about to happen, you have to get out of dollars before the announcement.
Yeah.
You go and you buy as much gold and silver as you can get your hands on.
Well, this is where I was very happy with the invention of Bitcoin, and have been kind of sad that it's kind of gone back into the background over the years. Because I often thought that was you can't buy anything. Yeah, you're right.
You could just buy shit, right? If I could go to 7-Eleven and pay with Bitcoin, I know it's a viable alternative to any currency.
Yeah, and I claim that when we start to get to the point that's obvious that the dollar's losing significant value, all of a sudden I bet you find businesses willing to accept Bitcoin.
Maybe.
And then it's going to become a viable currency. And the beautiful thing about Bitcoin as a currency, it's outside the control. of the
Well,
government.
here's the deal, and it's a philosophical point, and it's in the philosophical literature for hundreds and hundreds of years. John Locke talked about it in the 17th century. You can find it before that in other ways. Money is anything we agree has value,
Right.
and it's only the agreement that matters. And the perfect example is gold. Why on earth would gold be worth anything? It's a rock. Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
Go dig it up. But we all agree that it has value. And John Locke referred to it as a shiny yellow metal.
Yep.
And that's all it is. Diamonds. Who cares? I mean, who cares? But if you could get your life savings converted to diamonds, you could put it, almost anybody, maybe not Elon Musk, but almost anybody could put it in his pocket and go to any other country in the world and convert it to that cash there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Real transportable, real easy. But only because we all agree that those things are valuable.
Right. Yeah. And you might say to yourself, well, I never agreed to such a thing, but
Yes,
you agreed tacitly, because
Yeah, you did all
if
the way
I
through.
offered you a handful of diamonds in exchange for your car and you thought about it, well, that's your agreeing that these things have value.
Yeah. And look, I don't agree about any number of things that people think have value. So I don't buy them.
Right, right.
Nice and simple, right? There's a market for everything. Water's a really good example. When I'm really thirsty and I'm alone in a desert, water is worth everything in the world. When I'm at my house in the desert, water comes from a pipe in the kitchen. I can even make it hot if I want, right? It's just not that valuable. And
Right.
when I moved to Iraq, I was walking around the first day I got there, and it was 118 degrees, and I'm wearing long pants and long sleeve shirt because that was the local custom, and I had to. And I said, "My God, I need some water." And I bet I'm going to have to pay through the nose for this. So I bought a bottle of water like we would buy here, exactly the same size, exactly the same quality, the whole bit. And it cost me 18 United States cents.
Really?
Yep. That was the
In
price
the
of
middle
water.
of the desert?
That was what water cost. They had figured out how to get it there. It was easy. It cost 18 cents.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Under certain circumstances, and economists write about diamonds versus water.
Right.
And in some circumstances, water worth a lot more than diamonds, but not many.
Yeah, and really, I think it's in some sense, our interpretation of it is poor because we're used to seeing the bottle of water for like $1.20 or whatever it is. What's astounding isn't so much your 18-cent bottle. It's the $1.20 bottle. Do you know how much that water costs that's in there? Like fractions of a penny.
Yeah, fractions
What are you
of the-
paying for here?
The packaging costs so much more than the product.
Right, right.
It turns out in the bottled water market, the packaging is the product.
Yeah, yeah. You get free water when you pay for the packaging.
With a Fiji bottle, right? Because it looks so pretty, and
Now, there's going to come a warning shot. It may already have been fired, but pay attention to this. When there's a serious push at the federal level for the digital dollar, you've heard them talking about it already. The idea
this is a real
is
danger. This is a real danger. This
Yeah,
is a signpost that you should be paying very close attention to.
And they'll make the argument, as they have, that, well, Bitcoin, it's a good idea and it's secure and all of that, but really you want the government backing the thing. So let's have the digital dollar, which is Bitcoin, but under control of the government.
Yeah, I don't want that at all.
Here's the problem. If our currencies are already digitized in the sense that most of our monies sits on computers, but the government doesn't control it. It's decentralized. If you give the government centralized control over the currency like that, over a digital currency like that, this business about the new dollar, it's never going to announce the new dollar. It can just flip a switch.
That's right. Flip a switch.
And all
it's
the
right
money
there.
you had is now something different.
And there are further difficulties with this from a human rights or a civil rights perspective. The government will now know every single transaction you ever make.
Yep.
All of them. You will have literally no economic privacy.
And make no mistake, when they come full force with this digital dollar, they will make it illegal to use cash. In fact, they're already starting to do that. It's using cash is illegal in certain circumstances. Or at least they'll give you a big problem with it.
And you can't transport it under certain circumstances and amounts and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And
it's
if you
already
don't
very difficult.
If you don't believe us, next time you buy a car, try and pay in cash and see how quickly the FBI comes knocking on your door.
That's right. There is mandatory reporting from certain industries of large transactions paid off in cash. People don't realize this. And this was another thing that came up when I lived out of the country in Iraq. You've got to somehow get your money back home that you earn there, right? Because you have a mortgage back home, you have a family back home. They need the money to survive. And every time you go home, and people fly home from time to time when they're expats, you stuff your pockets full of the money that you've got to bring it home. But there's a limit of $10,000. And if you have $10,000 and they find a quarter at the bottom of your briefcase, you lose it all.
Oh, wow. Wow. And boy, do they have incentive to look for that quarter.
Yes, they do. You might even say they have incentive to keep a stack of quarters laying around.
Yeah.
And that is the level of control the government's going to have over you buying a tomato, right? Every single thing you buy is going to be seen. Do you really want to live in that world? Because that's the world that the American founders stood astride and said, no, we don't want to live in that world. And technology makes it a million, a billion, an unquantifiable number of times worse, right? So we, right now, should be standing up saying, stop it, but we won't. Not until it's far, far too late. So the people listening to us, I think we've given them a roadmap of how they might behave, what they might do, knowing what's undoubtedly coming. And I think every single word we said today is a prediction that I would stand behind 100%.
What we talked about is not a question of if it's going to happen. It's very much a question of when.
That's a when question.
Yeah.
And it might be in the next few years. Right? It's not. This isn't necessarily 20 years away. It could be 20 years away, but it's not necessarily 20 years away.
There's a line in the sand financially that I've been watching for decades, and it's coming up now in about 5 to 7 years, and that's when Social Security becomes insolvent.
Yeah.
And the question is, what happens then?
We're going to print more money.
I think we end up printing more money, and we end up living with higher inflation. We're not going to see 100% inflation, but I could easily see 5 to 10% on an ongoing basis. That just becomes the new normal.
And let's stop right there for a second, because I'm gonna dig into that autistic economist brain of yours, and I want to explain to people, because I don't think they know. At least not in large part. And I remember the time I found out about what compounding interest actually looked like. Think about 5% on a $10 product and tell me what happens in the space of 10 years to the price of that product.
Oh, yeah. $10 product at 5% interest or 5% inflation over the course of 10 years. It's gone up by 60%.
60%.
60%.
Over 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah, and it's not just that, it's everything. Everything's up 60%.
Everything, that's right. It's an imaginary $10 product, which means if you buy an imaginary car, it's the same 60% increase.
Right, 60%. Yeah.
So from 40,000 to 75,000, give or take.
Yeah.
Good God. And that might be the world we're moving towards. I suspect it is as well. And I suspect you're going to start hearing politicians talk about inflation differently because they're going to have to.
Yeah, and I think what you're going to hear a lot of, it's going to go on for a long time, is politicians blaming. They're going to blame the greedy corporations for raising prices. They're going to blame the banks.
The billionaires, broadly.
They're going to blame billionaires. They're going to blame, they'll end up blaming the Fed as people start to figure out what's going on. And that's when you know that they've reached the end of their rope, when they blame the Fed, because that's going to require some explaining to do. But then once you're done blaming all of those, the only person left is the politicians. Now there's one more person. That's the people that voted for them. Because you and I and everybody listening to this and everybody else in the country could stop this right now.
If we can't.
If we kicked, well, we could. When the guy comes up for election, vote for the other guy.
Yeah, and then he's replaced by the other guy who has all the same incentives. This is a problem of misaligned incentives.
Yeah.
And as an economist, you know where that goes. Misaligned incentives over the long term destroy everything they get a hold of.
Yeah, and by misaligned incentives, what James is pointing to is the fact that the politician can benefit from his decision and foist the cost of the decision onto the rest of us. And so that's exactly what he'll do.
And when people say, and they say it more and more lately, which gives me some hope, that there's no difference between the Republicans and the Democrats, they're right.
Yeah.
Because of this. They all have the same incentives. So their behavior, while different, is only marginally different.
And this is the brilliance of the founders when they set up a limited government, which we've broken the limits, by the way. But the point of limited government is to prevent all this happening because the government's not allowed to do these things.
That's right. And if you read the Federalist seriously, some people call it the Federalist Papers. I hate it when they do that. If you read the Federalist, this is the point. That you first have to have a government that can control the governed. And second, you have to oblige it to control itself. And we were really good at that first thing and really bad at the second over time.
Mm-hmm.
And there we are. Unless we get better at that second thing, controlling the government, it's not going to happen. And you don't control the government by voting one guy out and another guy in under exactly the same circumstances.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the obvious and the sad part of it.
And it's been how many decades now? We've tried the one party, we've tried the other party, we've gone back to the first, we've gone back to the second. Nothing ever changes.
Well, changed in 1860. That was the first Republican president.
Yeah, we got a new party.
Got a new party. They ran a candidate in 1854 or 1856, but I don't know who it was. Right? I can't tell you off the top of my head. Abe Lincoln wins. He's the first Republican president. And since then, the Republicans have done kind of pretty well over time. They're clearly one of the two parties. I think both parties are an abject mess right now. Neither seems to be able to figure out what it is.
But this is a long way afield, though related to the Fed's recent cut.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see more cuts.
Yeah, the numbers right now are indicating 2 more 25 basis point cuts this year and possibly one more in January.
Yeah, early next year. And that's a big deal. That's a lot of cuts.
Expect 2 things from that. 1, the economy is going to pick up. 2, inflation's going to get hotter.
Yep. And both of those things are going to happen if you get these series of cuts under the present circumstances. Okay, there we are.
It is kind of good news for Donald Trump in a way that he'll be able to blame the inflation on the cuts instead of the tariffs.
That's right. And he's likely to get 4 of them, which will knock down the interest payment quite a lot.
Yeah.
If he gets 5, all the more.
You would think that's a good thing. We'll cut down the interest payment so that then we come closer to balancing the budget. No, because what are the politicians going to do? They're going to go turn around and spend all that money that we just saved by having the lower interest rate.
That's right. Oh boy, more money. That's all a politician ever thinks.
Yeah.
No politician ever says, wow, we should save this for when things get rough.
Right.
That's just crazy drug talk that I'm doing right now, as my father used to say when I was a boy. He's out listening right now thinking, I never said that, but he did. Anyway, that's about the end of it, right? This has been a little depressing, but economics often is, right? There's a certain precision in the knowing of what's going to happen, and people don't believe that there's a precision, and they think that you're just full of hot air.
Oh, the only joy left in economics is that we get to say, "I told you so."
Yeah, that's right. And look, that's where we're at. And well, I mean, that's too bad, but so it often goes, right? No place is perfect and wonderful all the time, and every country has its problems. And this one is ours, and we own that, and that's how life is. So, Ant, until next time, you have a wonderful time of it, and I'll remind everybody, as I often do at exactly this moment, to be nice to each other. I know it's hard. I know it's hard for me too. And I point out often that I try and fail at being nice to people every day.
I'll attest to that.
I fail. Fuck off. I fail every day. But it's not the failing that matters. It's the trying that matters. Because I keep right on trying even though I know I'm a failure.
But succeeding is good.
And that's kind of what life is like more broadly, right? You get you screw up over and over and over again, but you keep trying to get things right. And then sooner or later you do. So keep trying. Be nice to each other. I'll see you next time, man.
See you next time, James. Words and Numbers is a Civil original podcast. We work with Civil to advance their mission of upgrading civilization by exploring ideas that promote civic equality and cooperation. We believe the most pressing issues humans face, war, poverty, debt, tribalism, arise from coercive institutions that bring out the worst in us. We at Civil look to voluntary solutions to these and other problems. We invite you to explore Civil's new platform at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.